رسول الله رسول الله رسول الله رسول الله رسول الله رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم صلى الله عليه وسلم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, dear brothers and sisters, to a new episode of Signs of Prophethood. This is your host, Omar Khalid. We're going to talk about justice. This is something that we're lacking around the world right now, and we need mostly. We're going to talk about this from the perspective that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is sent by Allah, for sure, to all nations to correct the injustices around the world at the time when he was sent, and also right now, because the message of Islam is a correction of everything wrong around us. But before this, we'd like to welcome Sheikh Ibrahim Zidane. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Very happy to see you, Sheikh Ibrahim. A very important topic, as usual, and it touches a lot of things in our lives right now, because we see injustices everywhere, not only in the West and the East and within the Muslim world. And before going into this, we'd like to give the example of the pre-Islamic era, before the Prophet ﷺ. There were injustices, and there were like a story about this we would like to touch. When one of the companions in Abyssinia, he was representing Islam, was talking about Islam to one of the kings, and he wanted to say what happened before Islam and what did the message of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ add when it comes to justice.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. The subject of justice and injustice is every human being can relate to it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that people can see clearly in the message of the deen of Islam, that it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and therefore it has to be the most just message whatsoever. That was clearly manifested in the speech and actions of the Prophet ﷺ and the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And justice is one thing, and injustices is basically when people, those who have power, they would oppress those who are weak. And before the Prophet ﷺ was sent, the injustices was something very obvious. And the powerful are abusing those who are weak and oppressed, and the men are abusing women. There's no rights for them whatsoever. The rich versus the poor, and so on. And this was manifested clearly in the statements of some of the companions before Islam, when they said this to Herakle, the king of the Romans, and also in Abyssinia, of how they would kill each other and oppress one another. And the Prophet ﷺ came to them and spreading among them truthfulness and justice and chastity and all kinds of great meanings and actions and so on, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changed them from that very humiliating state of life to be among the most just individuals that ever brought to mankind, which is the companions of Allah and those who followed them, following the way the Prophet ﷺ.
So we'd like also to talk, Sheikh Ibrahim, about and this is related also with the brotherhood in Islam. If we look at the West, when they tried to end slavery, we saw lots of bloodshed. So we can understand from this that the hearts weren't ready for this. And maybe you can legitimize that you don't have any slaves by law, by force, and you need a civil war to do this, to enforce that. But in Islam, you can see, maybe previously he was a slave, one of the Muslims, and he's praying side by side with another one who was a master at the time of Islam. So from this, how can we understand that, laying the foundation before even talking about justice, making inside the heart of a Muslim, believing that as this is essential in Islam, to feel that we are not different, we are the same.
This is a very beautiful subject, because many people, after there's no more slaves anymore, they go back and they misunderstand things. When they go back and see how things were put in the right context, in a world where there was no rights whatsoever for slaves, slaves are a commodity and they're abused and they're treated like animals and the like of this, and you compare that to the lives of the Muslims and verses in the Quran, a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ, and just give an example, because this is a chapter in books of fiqh till today. And this is an amazing thing, that Muslims, they learn this in the chapters of fiqh, even though it's not applied, but there was text about it to control these types of relationships. then you'd find some of the statements of the Prophet ﷺ in such a way that these slaves are ikhwanukum. The Prophet ﷺ would call them, they are your brothers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made you in charge of them. People are still today, they are in charge of one another. There is workers and there is people in charge of them and so on. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said and made it as a rule that if you order your brother to do something for you, this brother is what is the slave. Then with two conditions, that it's not over his capacity, and if it is, then you help him, and it's not something that is sinful. So anybody in working for someone nowadays, right? This is what work is.
Yes.
And they are to be given their rights fully and to be respected and so on and so forth. And if one of these slaves wanted to free himself, the slave himself, he decided, I want to free myself. Nobody has the right to stop him. And this is where the subject of al-mukataba. He would make a contract with his master that once he give him a certain amount of money, he's free. And how would he earn money? Working. So he can work and earn money and give him a portion every month till he free himself. So that's from his own will even. And they were teaching them and learning matters of knowledge, reach a level where many of these slaves, they became scholars in which people would come and sit under their feet to learn from them knowledge. And with the matters of expiating from sins by freeing a slave, the encouragement to free a slave, and whoever free a slave, he will be freed in the hereafter by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the hellfire. So many different things that really end up not having slaves because of these types of good deeds that the Muslims were ordered to do.
It's a very important point what you said, Sheikh Ibrahim, about like what they see. Like in Islam, they see it from their lens. They see that you have slaves at the time of the beginning of Islam and so on. So it must be like the same image when they kidnapped the black people from Africa and they made most of them die in the middle of the sea and so on, and they treat them as they are goods and service and so on. So and I heard even one of the she's American actually, author, she's not a Muslim. She was saying that sometimes attacks in Islam, when it comes to justice, it's because it's like psychological defense, because they see that they are having these things even right now. They have the problems, so they try to like put this and project that on Islam. Like when it comes to women, when it comes to like slavery, when it comes to freedom of speech and so on, because they are having problems with these things. So it's like creating a boogeyman out of nothing.
Right. And this is again when people, they follow their desires versus the wahy revelation from Allah. And when people look into the religion of Islam and how the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not about equality, that people like this word a lot, but there's no equality, there's no such a thing as equality. Someone that has physical power more than someone else, you cannot treat them as equal. You cannot treat a handicapped person as someone that is healthy, physically fit. Then the handicapped person will tell him, you just get the steps on the bus and ride the bus. If you're not able to do so, then sorry, you cannot, we have to treat you equal. Why people have to give him more attention and put him in a wheelchair? A person healthy, you would sometimes you're in the airport and you find these, wheelchair and everything, and it's a long walk for you to go to the plane. You say, well, I want the same treatment. But this is not an equality, man. This is someone that is in need of this versus someone that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the ability. So the same thing when it comes to equality versus justice. The religion of Islam is not propagating equality, rather justice. And that's what's perfectly needed. So that, for example, the relationship between men and women. Men are not equal to women, meaning they're not physically equal, they're not emotionally equal, and therefore the rulings has to be accordingly. And that's why they're equal in all of the different rights and rulings, yes, being human beings and so on and so forth. But what makes them different from one another, you would find rulings in the deen of Islam that serves these needs and these differences. So women are treated as women and men are treated as men. And this is the balance and this is the justice of the deen of Islam in all aspects. Relationships, transactions between someone that is hired and someone that hires someone, a relationship between rulers and the masses of the people, and the orders from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for them to be just, and how al-Imam al-Adil, a just ruler, is one of the people that will be under the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Day of Judgment. And the encouragement to have this And the balance of this is that it's not permissible for a Muslim to seek leadership. Stay away from it. It has to be established. It has to happen. So it's to be given, not to be sought. It's to be given to those who fits it perfectly. That's also the justice from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, we see the chaos that human beings have fallen in bloodshed and so on over these types of materialistic matters.
SubhanAllah. What came to my mind, Sheikh Ibrahim, there's sometimes, for some people, there's a paradox between justice and mercy. And that's why we see in the Christian doctrine, when they believe that Prophet Isa ﷺ, he was killed for the sacrifice, they think that, of course, falsely. And it's because to fulfill justice. Because there must be, they say it in this way, there must be a shed of blood for any sin. So, and they have a problem with, they don't mention the mercy. Where is the mercy and forgiveness? So we'd like to mention this. What's the difference when Islam comes with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ? What is the balance? When is justice used? When is mercy used?
Now, this is also something that can be seen clearly, perfectly in the Deen of Islam, and how that human beings, they are not to be forced to go to a higher level than justice. A person should not be blamed if he wants justice. He has the right to call for justice. But to encourage the person to go to a higher level, and that is to have mercy. That you go beyond the justice level, that you would forgive, that you would pardon. This is the beauty of the Deen of Islam. So a person, when he's ordered to forgive and to pardon and to have mercy, and to make it an obligation, this is not something always that would bring benefit.
Yes.
And one of the examples of this, when someone kills someone else. In Islam, it is not the right of the state, it's the right of the family of the deceased. They are the ones that hurt the most. And the right of the state for security to be established in the state, this is something to be observed, and that is the one that killed, he is to be killed.
Yes.
With the different conditions, of course, if the crime is established on him. But the family of the deceased, they have authority. And this is such a fulfillment to the pain that they go through when a loved one is killed, for example. It's different than when someone dies in a normal way than someone is killed. So they have the right, whether to choose for al-qisas, the retaliation, for that person to be killed, and the revenge is to be established, and that would relieve them. And nobody is to blame them and to say you're harsh and so on and so forth. But they're always encouraged, and we see that before the execution even is about to happen, before that, they would always be encouraged. But maybe at the moment when they see the criminal comes and he's going to be killed and so on, and they're present, meaning this family, and someone will come and advise them. A religious person would advise them and encourage them to forgive, taking them to this higher level. If they refuse, they have rights to refuse. But he will encourage them to take them to that level willingly, not to be forced to this level of mercy and so on. And if they do and they accept the blood money or even forgive in this is more reward for them. So this is the balance that we would see just in one example like this in the Deen of Islam. And in Surah, in more than one surah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this. وَجَزَاءُ سَيِّئَةٍ سَيِّئَةٌ مِثْلِهَا. That the sin is a sin to oppose it. فَمَنْ عَفَى وَأَصْفَحَ فَمَنْ عَفَى وَأَصْلَحَ فَأَجْرُ عَلَى اللَّهِ. Whoever pardon, and as a result of that, goodness comes as a result of this, his reward is by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Very beautiful, Sheikh Ibrahim. We would like to talk after the break about the story that happened, which is revealed in the Quran, actually, parts of it, about one of the Jews and how he was accused falsely, and the Quran, revelation from God, came to show that he wasn't the criminal and it was somebody else.
No.
So, dear brothers and sisters, we're going to meet after the break to talk about this. Stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Rasulallah, 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 Rasulallah.
Welcome back, dear brothers and sisters. We are talking about justice in the life of the Prophet ﷺ and his message, the message of Islam, as a proof that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was sent by Allah. So, Sheikh Ibrahim, before the break, we're talking about a story, and it was about a revelation which came by God to the Prophet ﷺ. And it is actually making it clear that one of the Jews, he is accused falsely of a crime, and the revelation came to say that he is not the criminal.
Now, this is a beautiful example of how justice is something that it never to be compromised, even if it's with your worst enemies. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade injustice, even with the ones that is out there to fight against you and to ruin your life, you have to still treat them with justice. There's no such a thing as it's okay to treat them with injustice. And these verses in Surah An-Nisa were revealed to the Prophet ﷺ when one of the Muslims, and it was actually a hypocrite, when he stole something and he was afraid to be caught, so he threw it, and it was maybe something like flour or something like this, and he threw it into the house of a Jew. So the people, when they found what they've been stolen in the house of the Jews, so they accused him. And when they came to the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ, and he said clearly to the people that I'm a human being. When people comes with their disputes, there's no revelation coming for every dispute. So he would judge among them according to what he sees of the evidences.
For everyone.
Right. And the judge would give the ruling according, if people have evidences of what their claim is, if they claim that this person had stolen something and they have the evidence for it, usually the rulings will be that he is to be guilty. So all of this is happening, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals to the Prophet ﷺ verses in Surah An-Nisa to free this Jewish man from this crime, and to make it clear that not to make those who are enemies to you a reason for you to not to treat them with justice. يا الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط. يا الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم. Even if it's against yourself, order to establish justice, even if it's against your own self, even if the verdict is going to make you lose some money. Be just, even if it's against yourself. ولو على أنفسكم أو الوالدين والأقربين. Even if it's against your parents, against your loved ones. And even more than this, that إن يكن غنيا أو فقيرا فالله أولى بهما. Sometimes people, they would undermine justice because the accused is a poor man. Say for example a case where there's someone is very rich, super rich, and a very poor man that is barely finding money and things of that nature, and they dispute over $10, right? And justice says that the poor person, he needs to pay the $10 to the super rich man. People would say to the rich man, come on, take it easy. Let the judge rule that the rich man pays $10 to the poor man. I mean, I'm just, if it's the case like this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no. Whether he is rich or poor, be just. The level of mercy, this is something else. Yes, ask the rich man to be merciful, to forgive him. Right? Ask him as a way to encourage him, but it's not something that is mandatory for him. If he asks for justice, nobody is to blame him. And this is again the balance, that justice can never be compromised. Don't feel bad for someone because he's poor, so let's break the rules of justice. You can deal with it with matters of mercy, forgiveness, and the like of this, but not to undermine justice whatsoever, because it's not permissible under any condition. And this is a rule in the Deen of Islam. There's no condition whatsoever that would permit injustices. There's no even necessities. Necessities meaning that if a person is about to be killed and he has a choice either to be killed or to kill someone else, what's the ruling in the Deen of Islam? To choose to be killed than to kill someone. Why? Because a person would say, I want to save my life, but how about the other life? Why is it your life is more sacred than the life of others? So this is a very serious matter, that a person might be in a situation where he has to submit himself to be killed, but not to have someone else to be killed as a result of that.
So are there any exceptions to this, Sheikh Ibrahim, like when it comes to, not when it comes to the rights of others, like you said, Sheikh Ibrahim, killing other people, it cannot happen. What about if a person is forced on gunpoint to eat pork or to drink beer or something like that?
The rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ease comes in it. When a person is in necessity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. Then it becomes sometimes even mandatory for the person to commit the sin to save his life. And there's other levels in the rights of the people that also to be understood. Justice with mercy, but it's justice. For example, theft. If a person is starving to death, and we have to put things in the right context, of course, because so that nobody would take this as an evidence that they can steal. Someone is starving to death now, and the only way for him to sustain his life is to steal food for him to eat to sustain his life. Then this is a mandatory thing for him.
It's not for entertainment or enjoying the...
It's not because he wants to have a cheesecake, for example, or something like this, and to live a luxurious life.
SubhanAllah.
No, he just trying to save his life. So this is something becomes permissible. And at the same time, even if he gets to be punished, but to save his life, then he has to do this. And even if he gets to be punished. So justice is something that would never be compromised. But with the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sinful acts, if it's under necessity, meaning that a person will die if he doesn't, then it becomes obligatory for him to save his life.
And that shows, Shaykh Ibrahim, how the message of Islam is so comprehensive. It sees every, like you could say, case as maybe a separate case under the big umbrella which is justice. I heard a story, and correct me if I'm wrong, Shaykh Ibrahim, that some of the slaves or servants, something like this, they stole. And at the time, I think of Umar al-Khattab, may Allah be pleased with him. So they were caught at his time. So he said something like, if they steal again, I'm going to cut your hand. And he was talking to their master. Because, and the pretext for this is that he was saying, you are making them hungry, and you don't feed them, and you let them go in the streets, and then we cannot say, like, the meaning of this, that we cannot say to them, like, don't go and eat, and don't, like, take from other things. So we can see, like, here, what's the reason behind that? Like, what's the reason behind their poverty? The masters who, come on, we are going to hold you accountable because you're the one who's responsible for that.
Right. And this is another aspect, as you said, the religion of Islam is so comprehensive, that the rulings are all together and they serve one another. Human beings, when they legislate, they look at the problem from one perspective only. But the rulings in the deen of Islam, since it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything is balanced. That's why once something is not applied, it causes corruption to everything else. So therefore, when the justice system in the deen of Islam is not just made, it's not for punishment.
Yes.
It's actually for deterring the crimes and deterring the evil more than punishment. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاتٌ يَا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. That you have in al-qisas. Al-qisas is the equal retaliation of punishment. Like whoever killed, you get killed and so on. You have life in this, not death. When a person look at it from the perspective, someone is killed, and as a result of that, we're going to the authority will kill the one that killed him, the killer. That means two lives died in this case. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says there is life saved in this. In this ruling, life is saved. Whether if people forgive him, or then if this crime is committed and two people died as a result of this, how many crimes, other crimes, it would make people stay away from it.
So that means it's strong, Shaykh Ibrahim, to abolish the capital punishment, like in some countries and so on. It's against the religion.
It's against the deen, of course. And it creates more crimes and more killing. That's what we see in the life that we live in. When it's applied, this rules of retaliation, no crimes.
SubhanAllah.
So this is the difference between rulings that comes from Allah versus human-made crimes that increase, actually punishment that increase the crimes and not to make it less.
So we can say in the end that Sharia is actually justice. It's not like what other people they claim and say about the Sharia.
Definitely. And that's why it is mandatory for us as Muslims to learn and to spread the proper knowledge in these matters.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Shaykh Ibrahim. We always feel pleased to have you. Thank you so much. Thank you, dear brothers and sisters. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.